All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's class. Today we're going to talk about in very general terms, an overview of cellular respiration. Now, in our previous video, we talked about photosynthesis in detail, and there's even a video prior to that one that talks about photosynthesis or a general overview of photosynthesis. We're still doing the same thing. This is just an overview of cellular respiration, and we're just going to review some of the key concepts that were discussed in class and just kind of sum up what we did. So, first of all, what is cellular respiration? Now, we might think of cellular respiration kind of like breathing, right? Where the cells breathe the same way we do. And obviously, that's not the case, but in a way, indirectly speaking, we do know that cellular respiration is indirectly affected by the oxygen that we breathe, because we do know that the oxygen that we breathe is, in fact, one of the byproducts of photosynthesis. But let's talk about what cellular respiration is, what aerobic and anaerobic are. And we're going to see very generally the four steps that are involved in cellular respiration. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get started then. So if we were going to define cellular respiration, we would define cellular respiration as the release of sugar and other carbon-based molecules used to make ATP when oxygen is present. So the first thing is that cellular respiration, that's why we said that it indirectly has to do with breathing, because oxygen must be present. The second thing is that it involves the release of sugar and other carbon-based molecules. Okay, so sugar, or glucose to be exact, plays a very important role in cellular respiration. Moving on, we know that cellular respiration is an aerobic process, meaning that it needs oxygen to take place. And I was mentioning in class today that a way of knowing if cellular respiration is occurring in the presence of oxygen or not is when we exercise and our muscles don't have any oxygen to intake, we start getting sore, because cellular respiration needs oxygen to occur, because remember, we have ATP molecules that are being formed, and the ATP molecules is what our body uses as cell energy. Okay, so again, cellular respiration is an aerobic process. It needs oxygen to undergo. Cellular respiration occurs in the mitochondria of the cell. So basically, in the mitochondria of the cell, and this is the cell organelle that we mentioned in the last chapter, and the cell and the mitochondria is where cellular respiration occurs, which is where most of the ATP is formed. However, the mitochondria does not make ATP directly from foods. It's not like where I eat, it goes straight to the mitochondria, and the mitochondria generates ATP. The mitochondria does generate ATP, but foods must be broken down into smaller molecules such as glucose. So again, the formation of ATP, or the synthesis of ATP is the word I'm looking for. The synthesis of ATP does in fact occur in the mitochondria, but it does not occur directly from foods. The foods are broken down into smaller molecules such as glucose. So that means that the food that we eat is eventually turned into sugar. And I was mentioning this in class, that eventually all food that we eat will turn into sugar, because that is what the body needs in order for cellular respiration to occur. Now, we do know that glucose, or that the molecules from the food that we eat must be turned into glucose. And here is another important detail. Let me get my pointer real quick. Here's another important detail of cellular respiration. It's that the glucose is broken down by glycolysis, which is where glucose is broken down into 2-3 carbon molecules and make 2 ATP molecules. So literally, what's happening in glycolysis is that the glucose molecule, the carbon that makes up the glucose molecule, is literally being broken down in half. And what that means is then that two ATP molecules are actually being formed when that happens. So even the glucose is broken down into other components such as glycogen, which is what glycolysis is, basically when glycogen is being made. Okay, so again, glucose is broken down by glycolysis, and glycolysis is not an aerobic is not an aerobic process. That means that glycolysis does occur or can occur in the absence of oxygen. Glycolysis is an anaerobic process because it does not require oxygen. Okay, so glycolysis does not require oxygen. And again, an example of that, when I was talking this morning in class, is when you go to the gym and the next day, or you work out, or you do any strenuous work, and the next day you wake up all sore. It's because your muscle cells were still producing energy. They were just producing energy based on the absence of oxygen, which is mainly the glycolysis process, or the Krebs cycle. So let's talk about the Krebs cycle. It says the Krebs cycle produces molecules that carry energy to the second part of cellular respiration. This takes place in the interior space or matrix of the mitochondria. So let's talk about the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle basically produces molecules that carry energy, okay? And they carry that energy to the second part of cellular respiration. And this occurs in the interior space or the matrix of the mitochondria, as it's stating out. And there are 4 steps. Now, these are 4 very general steps of glycolysis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize them. And then in our next class and in our next video, we'll definitely go more in depth into what cellular respiration is. So the first step says that 3 carbon molecules from glycolysis are broken down in a cycle of chemical reactions. So basically what's happening, and you can actually see it down here in this equation, is that this glucose molecule is actually being broken down. So that's the first step. It says the 3 carbon molecules from glycolysis are broken down in a cycle of chemical reactions. It says a small number of ATP molecules are made. Basically 2 ATP molecules are made. So in the first part, which is basically in the Krebs cycle here, when those 3 carbon molecules are broken down, it's right here. It's in the part of glycolysis. Those carbon molecules are broken down into 3 carbon molecules, and they actually make 2 ATP. So that's the first step. The second step says that energy is transferred to the second stage of cellular respiration. This part of the process takes place in and around the inner mitochondria. So again, the first thing is that the glucose molecule, the carbon in the glucose molecule is broken down into 3 carbon-based molecules. Then energy is transferred to the second stage of cellular respiration. The third step is that energy is transferred to a chain of proteins in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. And 4 is that large molecules of ATP. It's actually supposed to say large amount, not large molecules. Large amount of ATP molecules are made. Okay, so again, first step is that in the glucose, which is this molecule right here, this chain is broken down, and you have 2 3 carbon-based molecules. And the second step, energy is transferred to the second stage of cellular respiration. And the third step is that energy is transferred to a chain of proteins. And then finally, large amounts of molecules of ATP are made. How many ATP are made, or what is the amount of ATP made in this process? Well, about 36 to 38 molecules of ATP are made. Remember that we already make 2 in the process of glycolysis, and then in the actual process of cellular respiration itself, there's about 34 to 36 molecules made. Another interesting thing about cellular respiration is that the byproducts of cellular respiration of photosynthesis. So the oxygen in photosynthesis, and this is what we see here, the oxygen in photosynthesis, which is a waste product in photosynthesis, is used along with glucose so that the cell can undergo cellular respiration. And likewise, the water and the carbon dioxide that is a waste product in cellular respiration is actually used in photosynthesis. So again, if you look at photosynthesis and cellular respiration, they're mirror images of each other, because again, if you look at the beginning of cellular respiration, of course, there is a whole bunch of steps between the products, I mean, the reactants and the products. But so you guys have an idea, the glucose and the oxygen that we get from cellular respiration is what is needed to, the glucose and the oxygen that we get from photosynthesis is what is needed to undergo cellular respiration. Once cellular respiration is done, the 36 to 38 ATP molecules are made. The carbon dioxide and water, which are basically waste products of cellular respiration, is then needed so that plants and other organisms can undergo photosynthesis. So there you have it, guys. This is a very brief summary of what cellular respiration is. Hopefully this video is helpful and you guys can review it. So we'll see each other in our next class. So stay safe and bye-bye.